Good morning, students. In this video, we'll study about respiration. So, mainly our study will be focused upon what is respiration, what are the different steps of respiration, and what are the different types of respiration. So, first, we'll start with what is respiration. So, the definition of respiration is the biochemical process in which the cells of an organism obtain energy by combining oxygen and glucose, resulting in the release of carbon dioxide, water, and ATP. So, respiration is the biochemical process. What is the meaning of biochemical process? Bio means life. So, this respiration process will take place inside the living organism. So, it is a biochemical process. So, in this process, so some chemicals like oxygen, glucose, they will combine, and finally water, CO2 will be released. So that's what is known as biochemical process. So biochemical process in which the cells of an organism obtain energy. So what is the significance of this respiration process? So if the respiration process takes place, then finally the cells, they will obtain energy. And how this energy will be obtained? So by combining oxygen and glucose. So oxygen and glucose molecule, so they will combine together and resulting in the release of carbon dioxide, water, and ATP molecule. So what is the formula of glucose? C6H12O6. So this glucose combines with oxygen to produce CO2, water, and energy will be released in the form of ATP. Now, so this respiration process of respiration and the process of photosynthesis, so there is a little bit of similarity in them. So we will discuss that. Photosynthesis involves the use of energy from sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide to produce glucose molecule and oxygen. But on the other hand, cellular respiration use glucose and oxygen to produce carbon dioxide and water. So process of respiration and process of photosynthesis, they are just a reverse process of each other. In photosynthesis, what we are seeing, that photosynthesis involves the use of energy from sunlight. So they use energy from sunlight, and they use water and carbon dioxide to produce glucose molecule and oxygen. But in respiration, we observe that glucose molecule and oxygen, they will combine together to produce carbon dioxide and water, and energy will be released. In photosynthesis, energy is getting absorbed from sunlight. In cellular respiration, the energy will be released. So the process of respiration and process of photosynthesis, they are just reverse process of each other. So in this diagram, it will be clear. So this is the equation for photosynthesis and this is the equation for respiration. So in this equation for photosynthesis, we can see that 6 molecule of CO2 combines with 6 molecule of H2O in presence of light energy to produce 1 molecule of glucose and 6 molecule of oxygen. But in process of respiration, that 1 molecule of glucose combines with 6 molecule of oxygen to release energy, and CO2 and water will be also released. So these two equations, they are just a reverse process of each other. So hence we can say that process of respiration and photosynthesis, they are reversible process. Now we'll study about the steps of respiration. What are the steps in which the process of respiration takes place? So we have discussed nutrition in organisms in the last section. The food material taken in during the process of nutrition is used in cells to provide energy for various life processes. So during the nutrition process, we intake the solid food, and finally the digestion of food takes place in our body, and finally this digested food, so it is transported to the each and every cells of our body, and this digested food it enters inside the cell, and the breakdown of digested food takes place to release energy. So finally, what is the end product of the digested food? Suppose if any person will eat carbohydrate, then carbohydrate will be broken down into glucose, protein will be broken down into amino acid, fats will be broken down into fatty acid and glycerol. So these glucose, proteins, fatty acid and glycerol, they will enter inside the cell, and finally further breakdown of this glucose will takes place. Mainly glucose is the energy giving food, so this breakdown of glucose will takes place to release energy. And what is the use of this energy? So this energy will be used in various life processes. So these are the various life processes: nutrition, respiration, transportation, excretion, control, growth, reproduction, movement. So these are the various life processes. So for maintaining these various life processes, we need energy which will come from the breakdown of glucose. This energy will be released, which will be used in these life processes. So now diverse organisms do this in different ways. Some use oxygen to break down glucose completely into carbon dioxide and water. Some use other pathways that do not involve oxygen. So now it will vary from organism to organism, that how they derive energy from the glucose molecule. So some organism, they derive energy from glucose molecule by using oxygen, but on the other hand, some organism they derive energy from glucose molecule in absence of oxygen. In all cases, the first step, the breakdown of glucose, a 6 carbon molecule into 3 carbon molecule called pyruvate. So whether the breakdown of glucose is taking place in presence of oxygen or in absence of oxygen, so this step will be the common step. And what is this step? So this is the first step of respiration, where the breakdown of glucose molecule takes place. So glucose is a 6 carbon compound molecule, 6 carbon molecule, or we can say 6 carbon compound molecule, C6H12O6. So this 6 carbon compound glucose, it will be broken down into 3 carbon compound, which is the pyruvate. So this is the first step of respiration. So in this slide it will be clear. So what is the first step of respiration? So this 6 carbon compound glucose, it will be broken down into 3 carbon compound pyruvate. Pyruvate is also known as pyruvic acid. In some books it will be written as pyruvate, in some books it is written as pyruvic acid. So no need to confuse, pyruvate and pyruvic acid both are same. So first step is conversion of 6 carbon compound glucose into 3 carbon compound, which is the pyruvate, and this step is known as glycolysis. And glycolysis takes place in cytoplasm of the cell, and glycolysis is a common step which is present in aerobic respiration as well as in anaerobic respiration. And what is aerobic and anaerobic respiration, we will discuss little later. Now this process takes place in the cytoplasm. This process means the process of glycolysis. Glycolysis process takes place in the cytoplasm. Further, the pyruvate may be converted into ethanol and carbon dioxide. So in this diagram, so this glucose is converted into pyruvate. Now further breakdown of this pyruvate, either this pyruvate, it can convert it into carbon dioxide, water and energy, or this pyruvate, it may convert it into ethanol, carbon dioxide and energy. So it will depends on presence and absence of oxygen. Now we'll discuss about type of oxygen. So on what basis we have categorized the different types of respiration? On the basis of presence and absence of oxygen. So if this pyruvate, If the breakdown of pyruvate takes place in presence of oxygen, then it will be known as aerobic respiration. If the breakdown of pyruvate takes place in absence of oxygen, then it will be known as anaerobic respiration. So on this basis, we have categorized the different types of respiration. So aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. I hope it is clear. Aerobic respiration means breakdown of glucose in presence of oxygen, especially that pyruvate. And anaerobic respiration means breakdown of pyruvate in absence of oxygen. Now we'll discuss about the anaerobic respiration. So this pyruvate, this pyruvate, it will be broken down in absence of oxygen because it is anaerobic respiration. And finally this 3 carbon compound pyruvate, it will be broken down into 2 carbon compound ethanol C2H5OH, and carbon dioxide and energy will be released. And this anaerobic respiration takes place in the body of yeast. So this process takes place in the yeast during fermentation. Since this process takes place in the absence of air, it is known as anaerobic respiration. In anaerobic respiration, breakdown of pyruvate, here in this slide I have written breakdown of pyruvate using oxygen takes place in the mitochondria. This process breaks up the 3 carbon pyruvate, 3 carbon compound pyruvate molecule to give 3 molecules of carbon dioxide. The product is water, the other product is water. Now in this diagram you can see aerobic respiration. We will discuss about aerobic respiration. In aerobic respiration, what will happen? This 3 carbon compound pyruvate, it will be completely broken down into one carbon compound, which is the carbon dioxide. Water and energy will be released, and this process will take place in the mitochondria of the cell, and it will take place in presence of oxygen. So hence it is known as aerobic respiration. This process was the anaerobic respiration, and this is the aerobic respiration. So this step, glycolysis, is a common step in anaerobic respiration as well as aerobic respiration. The release of energy in this aerobic process is a lot greater than in the anaerobic process. So generally large amount of energy will be released if the breakdown of glucose takes place by the process of aerobic respiration, and very less amount of energy will be released if the breakdown of glucose takes place by the process of anaerobic respiration. Sometimes when there is a lack of oxygen in our muscle cells, another pathway for the breakdown of pyruvate is taken. Here the pyruvate is converted into lactic acid, which is also a 3 carbon compound. This buildup of lactic acid in our muscles during sudden activity cause cramps. So in this diagram you can see, so there is a one more pathway by which glucose can be broken down, and this pathway of breakdown of glucose takes place in our muscles. And in which condition this pathway of breakdown of glucose will take place? In absence of oxygen. Suppose that if any person perform a vigorous exercise or very hard exercise, in that case what will happen? In absence of oxygen, so energy is required, so we have to somehow we have to release that energy, but there is not adequate amount of oxygen in muscles. So in that case what will happen? So this pyruvate, glucose will be broken down into pyruvate. Now this pyruvate, in absence of oxygen, lactic acid will be produced. So there will be incomplete breakdown of pyruvate into lactic acid takes place, and very little amount of energy will be released, and this lactic acid, it will get accumulated in our muscle, and finally it will lead to the cramp. Now in this slide we will do comparison of aerobic and anaerobic respiration. So in this column there are some criteria is given. On this criteria we will compare the aerobic and anaerobic respiration. This is the column for aerobic respiration and this is the column for anaerobic respiration. So the first criteria is oxygen required. So in aerobic respiration, oxygen is required, yes, because it is a aerobic respiration, so definitely it will take place in presence of oxygen. In anaerobic respiration, there is no requirement of oxygen because it will take place in absence of oxygen. Now, second criteria is occurs in part of the cell. In which part of the cell aerobic respiration will take place? So answer is mitochondria. Anaerobic respiration, it takes place in cytoplasm of the cell. Now, third criteria is glycolysis. Regarding glycolysis, whether glycolysis takes place in aerobic respiration or anaerobic respiration. So, it is a very important point that glycolysis is a common step, whether it is aerobic or anaerobic respiration. So, in aerobic respiration, yes, glycolysis will take place. In anaerobic respiration, also glycolysis will take place. Next criteria is regarding ATP produced. So in aerobic respiration, large amount of energy is released. So around 36 net gain of 36 ATP takes place during the aerobic respiration, and only net gain of 2 ATP takes place in anaerobic respiration. Next criteria is whether the glucose is completely broken down or not. So in aerobic respiration, yes. So this 6 carbon compound glucose, it will be completely broken down into single carbon molecule, which is the CO2. But on the other hand, in anaerobic respiration, incomplete breakdown of glucose takes place. Incomplete breakdown of glucose means this 6 carbon compound glucose, so they will be incompletely broken down into either 3 carbon compound lactic acid or 2 carbon compound ethanol C2H5OH. Now the last criteria is end product. What is the end product? In aerobic respiration, the end product is CO2 and water. But on the other hand, in anaerobic respiration, the end product will be, so finally glucose will be converted into either lactic acid if it is taking place in our muscle, or glucose will be converted into ethanol and CO2 if the process of respiration is taking place in yeast. Now, the energy released during cellular respiration is immediately used to synthesize a molecule called ATP, which is used to fuel all other activities in the cell. So whatever energy will be released during the process of respiration, so immediately it will used up in the formation of ATP. ATP is a energy molecule, energy currency of the cell, and full form of ATP is adenosine triphosphate. So in this slide you can see that, so this is the ATP ADP cycle. So in this cycle you can see that this is a ADP, adenosine diphosphate. So this particular molecule, this particular structure is adenosine, and this is the diphosphate. Di means 2 and phosphate means 2 phosphate molecules are attached. So this is ADP, and finally one more phosphate molecule they will combine, and this ADP, it will be converted into ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So here 3 phosphate molecules are present, and if there will be requirement of energy, then this terminal phosphate, it will be broken down, and finally energy will be released. In these processes, ATP is broken down, giving rise to a fixed amount of energy, and this fixed amount of energy is roughly around 30.5 kilojoule per mole of energy, which can drive the endothermic reactions taking place in the cell. So this much only in this video. In next video we'll discuss some more topics related with this respiration. Thank you. Have a nice day.